Welcome to Kepler 186f, a planet we've lived on for a week. My name is Nikolai Arilano and I'm an engineer of this group. We're the first explorers of the extrasolar planet 490 light years away from our planet. Having arrived from Earth using FTL drive, we were now ready to settle on this planet and to call it a new home. This is day 8 and welcome to What the Math. With everything fully functioning, enough energy to survive and enough water being produced, we decided it was time for us to expand and to create something new. And this idea came from Iker. Iker Wilkinson was from Great Britain, and he was not just a biologist, but he was also a keen robotics expert. We didn't know this about him, but he actually used to make robots for a living. He created quite a lot of bots, and in the past was also known for participating in various robotic challenges. He presented us with an idea that we should have thought of earlier. Why not construct a factory that is able to produce our own robots? Robots that will be able to help us expand even faster and that will be able to help us with both transporting the goods and constructing new buildings. The idea was simple and brilliant. Use our factory to construct parts and then construct robots using them. The so-called Robotics Facility was going to be constructed on day 8 and we all were very excited about it. And for the first time, most of the construction material for this new building came from our mine. We were able to mine enough metal and enough ore to actually create several metal pieces that was then to be used in constructing this new building. This was the first time in human history that someone was able to mine something from another planet and then use it to construct a new building. This was the beginning of day 8 and we were just about to finish constructing what were to be the first extrasolar, extraplanetary building constructed out of material from that planet. And watching one of our bots constructing its own factory where some of its friends and possibly its partners would be made was somehow ironic. This building that was to become a new factory that would produce even more robots could possibly be an amazing stepping stone to the future of our colony. As long as we were able to construct more bots, we would be able to expand in no time. And time was going really fast on day 8 because this was a really complex task. Not only did we have to produce a machine capable of producing more robots, but we also had to construct a repair machine so that those robots could repair themselves when they needed to. This required quite a lot of different materials and I had to produce more semiconductors. And for the first time on day 8 we witnessed something unusual. This planet had a sandstorm that could possibly cause some damage to the parts that were outside. We weren't sure if any of the wind turbines or the solar panels might be damaged, but those of us who were outside were in quite a lot of danger. We had to make sure that we stayed inside and we also had to make sure that our bots were not exposed to this wind. Even though the atmosphere of this planet was not very thick, the particles moving at speeds of up to 200 km per hour were able to damage our bots or our suits quite easily. This was something that we didn't expect this planet to have, but we now knew that this planet was even more dangerous than we anticipated. Watching this storm from the outside also made us thankful that we've created such a big base where we could actually hide from it. If it wasn't for reinforced glass and for reinforced metal used in the construction of these modules, we would most likely be all dead now. At the end of day 8, those of us who were sleeping could hear the rocks pelting against the windows and we couldn't fall asleep. Most of us were actually not sure if the base is going to survive this storm. The sheer force of the wind was incredible, and even though it provided us with quite a lot of energy, and our turbines were spinning way over the allowed speeds, we were still worried that maybe something might go wrong and something might get destroyed in the process. The sandstorm finally settled close to dawn and we were all already awake. Most of us haven't really slept very well and were still quite tired from the night before. This was the first time humanity witnessed such a big sandstorm anywhere in the universe, and we now knew that we had to be really careful when it happens again. Luckily nothing was damaged and most of our turbines were still working and everything was still functional. Some of the parts needed a little bit of repair, but I knew I could do this when I had free time and when we construct one of our first robots. And because our goal for day 9 was really simple, we decided to just focus on that instead. That goal was to create our first robot, and whether we succeed or not, only the future would tell. Unfortunately, the only robot we could currently construct and the only robot I actually knew how to make with help from my friend Iker was a carrier robot. He showed me how to make one quite simply, and I've decided to try to make one on day 9. This was the dawn of day 9 and I was still busy making necessary parts for our first robot. I would need to construct it out of metal, some bioplastics produced from our plants, and of course one of the semiconductors I now learned how to make. And while I was busy making the semiconductor, the rest of us were busy preparing our lunches, our suppers, and our dinners for today. After a week on this planet, we finally learned how to take care of our plants really well, and we've managed to actually have a surplus of food. This is something that we didn't expect because we didn't really know how much sunlight these plants will need and how well they'll grow in this soil. This also gave us an idea that maybe we should make another one of these biodomes and produce plants that would be a little bit different. But this was something we could do in the future because currently we had just enough food for all 7 of us, and we produced enough bioplastics to construct various things as well. But today was also the day when I realized that it was not enough of having just me as an engineer. I spent most of my time constructing things in the factory, and most of the time was actually used up on semiconductors. These items were very difficult to produce, and I often needed several hours to make just one. On day 8, time was going really fast. Unfortunately, I was not able to get even close to producing the robot, and I was still busy making the semiconductors. This was something that was a lot more challenging than I imagined, and it took me way too much time to make even one of these things. The day 8 was coming to end and I still was working and getting really tired. Unfortunately, I wanted to finish making at least one of these, and it was just getting to me. I was getting frustrated, I started making mistakes, and unfortunately, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to finish it. But then I just decided to give up and to hit the sack. I was making too many mistakes and it was actually going to do much more damage to the semiconductor. For me, this day was over, and as I fell asleep, I started dreaming about my home, my country, and my family back home. Having spent most of my childhood in Russia, my dreams today were of that country. I've dreamt of forests, I've dreamt of large fields of flowers, and long, dark winter nights. But as I was dreaming, I heard noises from the outside as my colleagues were awake and busy preparing food, making new metals for our production, or making meals for themselves and eating. This finally started to feel like home. This place, so far away from Earth, was finally comforting and had a very homey feel about it. Most of us stopped being distressed, most of us stopped being sad, and our conversations reflected on that. We actually stopped reminiscing and remembering what it was like back home and started focusing on this planet right here. All 7 of us had some brilliant ideas on how to improve this colony and how to make it even better. How to make this not just a home away from home, but a new home for humanity. But unfortunately, all of our ideas depended on me. Most of the things had to be engineered from scratch, and most of those things were all new to me as well. Despite my experience in various engineering fields, I was still quite new to all of this modular engineering and 3D printing that was required of me. I secretly hoped that one day someone else would arrive to either help me or replace me. And even though I started to like my life here, I found it very challenging as the only engineer of the colony. But at least we finally built our bot repair system that was now able to maintain bots instead of me. This would save me quite a lot of time because before this, every few days I had to repair the bots manually. While sitting in front of the plant and ruminating about his own life, Luis had another brilliant idea. He actually thought that maybe we could actually build another storage area a little bit closer to where we're expanding, because this would allow us to expand much quicker and also would prevent our resources from deteriorating, because during the storms many boxes got damaged. Most of our resources right now were simply laying outside, and any kind of a sandstorm would endanger all of these resources, and most of them could perish in an instance. Also, having expected some of the ore that we've actually collected from the mine, we realized that these boxes also were not doing so well, so we needed to act quickly. We had to produce a storage facility that would be able to actually protect all of our resources and would also store it for us in one central location. So on day 9, we've decided to focus on building a new storage unit and storage facility for all of our materials. This meteorite reminded us that we had to work quick. It landed very close to our resources and it could have destroyed all our spares and all our remaining bioplastic. And even though we now knew how to construct all of this from scratch, this would have been disastrous for us because we were still a new and growing colony. At the end of day 9, we were still far behind from producing our first robot or even from finishing the storage facility. But we were working around the clock to try to complete it as soon as possible. I've never worked so hard in my life before and I was absolutely exhausted. I was thirsty, I was hungry, and even though I was quite happy to be here, my fingers were starting to sore and my feet were barely carrying me around. But nevertheless, I was determined to finish because not only was I about to become the first person to produce a robot on another planet, but this could actually create a first extrasolar colony inhabited mostly by robots. If we produce more than 7 of these guys, they will outnumber us and we'll be able to actually call this a robotic planet. Ironically, the only planet prior to this that had so many robots was Mars. Even many years ago, back in 2015, Mars actually had 7 robots on the surface, actively exploring, communicating, and even singing birthday songs to themselves. So if we at least build 7 of these little guys here, we'll actually be able to create something extraordinary and something reminiscent of the past back on Mars. Luckily, we finished the storage facility and all we had to do now is bring the boxes back and store them inside. They will be protected here from any kind of storms and will possibly even be protected from destruction by a meteorite. The night of day 10 sounded an alarm. We were short on power and I didn't even realize that it actually happened. We had to disable some of our factories and make sure that they don't waste too much electricity. And then it happened. All of our systems were shut down. We were low on power, we weren't producing enough energy, and it was still too dark to use our solar panels. This was a critical situation. We didn't know what to do. All of our power was out. Waylon Singleton, one of the workers, was frozen in fear outside. He was too afraid to go inside because he wasn't sure if there's oxygen. He was too afraid to do anything. Luckily, suddenly a little bit of wind picked up and the wind turbine started to spin really slowly. Then the sun started to come up. This gave us hope that maybe the solar panels will finally produce enough energy for us to sustain our colony. But this reminded us that we needed to construct more solar panels, more turbines, and more storage units for our energy. There is no way we would survive another one of these power outages, and even though the oxygen was still being produced and the water was still being pumped, this was a very dangerous situation for us. I've decided to re-enable the power on both of these factories and then got to work. We needed to plan a new power grid and use more solar panels and more turbines. This was a priority for day 11 and there was no way we could let something like that happen again. I've decided it was time to try to experiment and build a much larger turbine. I also wanted to see if we could actually build a much larger solar panel as well, because this is something that would definitely ensure our security when it came to power and energy. And it was just our luck that suddenly on day 11, not only was there a meteorite collision right next to us, but the Sandstorm picked up again. This was a very bad time for this. And even though the turbines were working in overdrive and were producing a lot of energy, we needed to finish constructing the solar panels and the wind turbines right next to them. And it seems like meteorites were getting closer and closer to us. This one almost damaged our solar panels, and if this had happened, we would be in a lot of trouble. We could not afford any kind of critical situations right now, and we needed to work really fast to construct that one solar panel and that one power turbine. But because of the strength of the winds, we were barely able to walk outside. Building something outside right now was very dangerous, and it would be almost impossible for us to even get there. Nevertheless, 3 of us decided to risk it and try to make it to the location. And our smart little construction bot decided to take a shortcut through the base and try to get to the location and start building one of these solar panels. Things were not going well for us, and then suddenly, just like that, the storm stopped. We were lucky this time that nothing else got damaged, and we were now able to finally finish the solar panels and the wind turbines. Unfortunately, the wind turbines that we had right now and the solar panels were not producing enough energy for the base anymore. I've disabled the factories and the robotic facilities because we needed to conserve the energy until the new turbine and the solar panel were built. The night 11 has fallen on us, and we only had about 1.5 energy reserves left. The turbines were still kind of spinning, but they weren't producing enough energy to sustain the whole base. In order for us to survive this night, we had to make sure that we build these solar panels by tomorrow. However, luckily for us, the night 11 was quite windy, and the wind turbines were producing just enough energy for our colony to sustain itself as long as we kept the facilities like factory and the robotics facility off. And finally, sunrise. Luckily, there was enough sunlight now to use our solar panels, so I could actually re-enable the factory. We've never felt so good seeing the sun, or I guess you could call it Kepler 186, as we did today. The solar radiation and the energy our solar panels were producing saved our lives again. However, we were not really close to finishing those new panels just yet. And in order to prevent this from ever happening again, I've decided to construct the largest possible collector of energy I've ever produced in my life. I wanted to place it somewhere safe away from possible collisions, and I've decided to place it right next to this mountain. We haven't given any of these objects a name yet, and we haven't named any of these mountains or ridges because there were just too many of them around us. But luckily, by the end of day 12, we've had our first large solar panel installed, and we're now waiting for the wind turbine and the new power collector to be completed. But because of all of the other things we had to maintain and make sure that everything on the base was functioning really well, this took a lot longer than we anticipated. This was day 13, and we're still not even close to achieving the tasks we set out for ourselves 2 days ago. And unfortunately, building new things became a lot more challenging now. We've just run out of all of the metal we brought with us from Earth, and we were relying entirely on our mind to produce everything. Every new piece of equipment and every new building we've built was made entirely out of iron and all of the other metal collected from this planet. And although on one hand it was very exciting to build all of these new buildings from the resources collected on this planet, at the same time it was a little bit concerning for me as an engineer that we had no more emergency material left. The wind turbine was finally completed. It was spinning so fast and produced so much noise that I could hear it from my bedroom. But luckily, it also produced just enough energy for us to sustain the colony at night as long as there was just a little bit of wind. Nevertheless, I couldn't wait for us to finish the large power collector. However, it required so much metal that it would probably take us 2 days to build it. And this was the beginning of day 13. Our colony, though large and fully functioning, was not really progressing anymore. It was very difficult to maintain things. It was very difficult for us to try to expand, and so what I've decided to do is, instead of building new buildings, for now we wanted to actually store up some materials, collect some food, and make sure we have enough reserve materials for in case of emergency. Most importantly, we needed metal. We needed to mine as much metal as we could and then produce it using the ore collected in this metal processor right here. Unfortunately, without having a bot to help us, we had to do all of this manually. None of our bots were able to either mine or produce metal, so all of us were always busy doing one of those things. But hopefully one day we'll be able to make a bot that will either be able to mine or help us in some other way. Until then, however, we were stuck doing this ourselves. And finally it happened. At the end of day 13, one of us got sick. She was our biologist and she was from China. Her name was SM, which stood for Xiao Ming. She was sick because she kept eating the same food over and over and was essentially suffering from malnutrition. And unfortunately, this is something that often happens with astronauts as well. Consuming the same food over and over in new conditions can actually be very dangerous. Without proper nutrition and without proper vitamins, our body can actually give up quite easily. and this is what she was experiencing. Her muscles were weak, she was barely walking, and she was experiencing a lot of nausea. Our only medic on staff, Luis, went to get medicine to help her. This was the first time he was actually required to do his proper job, and he was not excited to do it. He was hoping that none of us would get sick. We were all hoping that none of us would get sick. But unfortunately, we didn't expect that malnutrition would be the first cause of illness. Fortunately for her, he was a professional. With 17 years of experience as a medical doctor, he fixed her up in no time. But she was still exhausted, she needed to go to bed. No longer suffering from malnutrition, she now just went to bed. This would be a very long night for her because she was completely exhausted. But to prevent this from happening, Luis suggested that we actually start using other types of food. Luis suggested that if we construct a lab, we might actually be able to produce synthetic meat. And just as he said it, it happened again. Another one of us got sick from malnutrition. This meant that I had to get to work and construct the lab so we can actually produce something with a little bit more protein. Unless I was okay with this becoming a regular occurrence, I had to make sure that this never happens again. With so many new things to construct and so many buildings still unfinished, I was getting a little bit worried about our situation on this planet. Kepler 186f might be an amazing planet to one day colonize completely, but not having any experience with such a large colonization project, many of us started to get worried again. The combination of the problems that we started to face, including the fact that we were lacking metal, or that we were only producing one type of vegetable to eat, or also the fact that I still haven't built that one robot I was meaning to build 4 days ago, started to cause us a little bit of concern. But hopefully with persistence and with teamwork, we will be able to overcome all of these challenges the next day. Thank you for watching and see you in day 15. Bye bye.